Welcome everybody to Tokenomics DAO Community Call on Convex Finance. What we'll be covering is what is Convex, the tokenomics, just tokenomic breakdown, and then we'll roll into the Q&A. So what is Convex? Well, put it simply, TLDR, Convex is a protocol built on top of Curve. Okay, so to sort of understand what that really means, we sort of need to have a brief understanding of Curve. Obviously, it being built on top of it and whatnot. But for now, I guess TLDR is comprised of two solutions. That's a yield optimizer and a Bribe Marketplace. So to understand these, I guess we'll briefly explain what Curve is. So Curve is pretty much a DEX that specializes in low-fee stable swaps. Okay. If you think about the three participants in a DEX, you've got LPs, traders, and then token holders, right? So obviously LPs, they provide liquidity, traders trade between that liquidity, and token holders, they hold the token. So when you think about, for example, what fees Uniswap and SushiSwap normally charge, it's like a 0.3% fee, right? And this is good, obviously, because these fees are paid to LPs, right? And it's all about liquidity. So LPs are the ones who make the DEX work, so to speak. Without liquidity, there would be there'd be nothing to trade, right? So there needs to be an incentive for people to sort of deposit their liquidity on the DEX, okay? And this is what the fees sort of are, right? So the fees are charged from traders, and those fees go to LPs, right? Now, the thing is that traders, obviously, they want low fees, right? They don't want to pay high trading fees, and LPs sort of want the opposite, right? So this sort of diagram illustrates it properly. Like traders want to sort of go to places where, or they sort of go to pools where the trading fees are low, right? So in the case of Curve, it's like a 0.04 trading percent fee on stable swaps. And in the case of Uniswap or SushiSwap or something like that, the fees are a lot higher, right? And liquidity providers will tend to this type of pool, and then traders will tend to this type of pool simply because it's in their best interest, right? And then this obviously causes a problem in that, well, obviously LPs, they sort of need the traders' volume, right? That's where and then traders actually want the liquidity that the liquidity providers provide, right? So it's sort of like a catch-22. And what is Curve sort of like? What did Curve look to do? Well, they understood that for stable swaps, they sort of had to have a low fee swap, right? So a low fee charge, and that is good for traders, but bad for LPs, obviously, because again, who's going to deposit liquidity if they're not really going to be if it's not enticing them to, right? If they're not being incentivized to look to maintain that liquidity. Furthermore, token holders also can't be left out of this, right? So normally, I guess in a normal DEX, you'd have a fee being charged from the trader, and that goes partially to the liquidity provider, and then to the LP token, and then to the token holders, right? But then this also it just contributes to the problem even greater, right? So instead of liquidity providers, the ones who are actually risking their liquidity, they're the ones that are making the DEX work, they're being siphoned off some of this fee, and it's going to token holders, which again reduces their sort of incentive to maintain the liquidity on the DEX. So it isn't ideal, right? So this is what sort of Curve introduced the token model. They basically innovated on this, right? And they sort of aligned the incentives a lot better between all three participants, right? So traders obviously got low fees because that's what Curve sort of does. LPs, they still got the yield that they were looking for, right? So that's obviously their main reason for participating in this. They've got assets that they want to get a return on investment for, and they were still getting that in the case of Curve because they were getting these CRV emissions, right? And then token holders also got a fee share and, well, typical asset appreciation, right? And as you can see here, this is sort of a macro breakdown of how it works, right? Token holders were getting fees because obviously they have locked their tokens, right? So they are getting a fee share, and then liquidity providers also getting them mainly their I guess getting this CRV emissions, which is I guess their yield, right? Now in the Curve ecosystem, this is called boost. Okay, so these this boosted yield is what they call it. It's called max boost. Okay. So what then, if we want to analyze Convex, we sort of, again, we have to understand Curve and obviously CRV too. So what is the demand behind CRV then? Well, I guess the meta demand, you could call it, is generally the LPs, they want a return on investment on their assets, right? That's the whole reason for them participating in the system. They're going to deposit their assets and they want a yield, right? And the yield in the case of Curve comes in the form of their token emissions, right? So they deposit, let's say you deposit ETH, USDC, whatever it may be, and if you do what they want you to do, which we'll get to shortly, you get emissions on top of that, and you're happy, right? So what does that sort of mean, right? It means that the emissions, so wherever there is, I guess, yield, that's where liquidity is going to be directed. Okay, so wherever, in the case of Curve, wherever CRV emissions get directed to, i.e. which pool, right, it sort of begets liquidity, so to speak, okay? And then this ties in, this will make more sense once we look at, I guess, the solutions that Convex sort of provides for this. But the other side of that then is protocols, okay, so outside of Curve, what do they want? Well, they want liquidity for their tokens, right? And what I mean, when I say protocols, what I mean is, for example, let's say Convex Finance, okay? They have Brax, right, their stablecoin, and they want the most liquidity to be directed to that pool as possible, right? And if they can somehow influence where emissions are going to be deposited, right, they're going to obviously direct it to their pools, and then that's going to be very enticing for LPs to sort of deposit more liquidity there, and thus they have deep liquidity, right? So that's sort of like the demand for CRV, right? And the reason like the V token model sort of works, so to speak, and this is also why Convex sort of fits on top of it, is, well, what do LPs actually have to do, right, to get what they want? Because as mentioned, their sort of meta demand is yield, right? But what they have to do to actually get this result is they have to buy CRV and lock it up, okay, to get this max boost. Protocols, or what do protocols want? They want liquidity, as mentioned. That comes from the CRV emissions, right? So wherever these CRV emissions are going to go, it's going to be more enticing for the liquidity to congregate, I guess you could say. And that voting power, right, that the decision over where these CRV emissions get to, or where they're deposited rather, comes from the locked CRV, okay? And then finally, token holders, well, they obviously accrue bribes for pretty much this mechanism, right, this system of protocols wanting to direct liquidity to their pools, and they also get fee distribution from the pools if they lock up, right? And honestly, that's the whole key here, that basically all participants have to somehow look up the tokens, or there are some pain points, right? And that's where Convex really comes in, right? Because the issue, or the two major pain points with Curve is the lockup and optimization. Okay, so lockup pretty much for an LP to get this max yield that they so desire, right? They sort of have to lock up the correct amount of tokens for 4 years, okay? And that is it's a long time, right? And the same goes for token holders, right? Imagine you're just a CRV token holder and you want yield on that asset, right? You just want a fee share from whatever is going on in Curve, so to speak. Well, you're gonna have to lock that up too, right? And depending on how much you lock up, how long you lock up, then this is like the requirements that the V token model sort of created, right? Furthermore, the other difficulty, the other pain point is the optimization, right? This, to sort of get for LPs to get what they want, they have to be constantly managing their position. Okay, it isn't a simple set and forget strategy, and then obviously this incurs a lot of gas. So this is pretty much like the first place where Convex, I guess, came in and innovated, and their solution was pretty much, well, for LPs, we're going to provide max boost with no lockup. Okay, and pooled VCRV. We'll look into actually how this works later in the tokenomics breakdown, but pretty much that was the solution for LPs, right? And then for CRV holders, it's fairly similar. They're going to be providing a better form of yield and in a liquid state, right? So rather than having to lock up CRV to get this like fee share, well, they're going to be pretty much providing a liquid wrapper CVX CRV, okay? And obviously, all of this is, I guess, wrapped or veiled in the fact that it is automatic, right? Nobody has to sort of go in and manage it. So it is literally a set and forget strategy. So this, I guess, resulted in it being very enticing and subsequently, well, yeah, it built a pretty decent flywheel. So it work well. Users, so CRV holders, obviously they want yield on their assets without having to sort of lock it up. Well, they can go ahead and deposit that into Convex and get the 1-for-1 wrapper. Okay, and this is a liquid wrapper, so if they want to, they can go and sell it. Then Convex pretty much takes that CRV, locks it in Curve, and then starts to provide, I guess, boosted rewards to LPs. And then this pretty much allows them then to start accruing CRV rewards. Okay, so from these LP positions that people have deposited, and in turn, people also depositing the CRV to sort of get this max boost, then what they pretty much do is siphon off like a fee share type thing, right? So 10% of this, the fees that come from the LP positions, they're pretty much directed back to the CVX CRV stakers, right? So this is where I guess the loop, it comes full circle in that. So somebody depositing CRV is going to get some amount of fee share for simply holding an asset that is liquid, right? So it's obviously quite enticing for them to do that. And obviously from the LP side, it is also very enticing because you're just depositing your assets, you're getting max boost or close to it at least, and you're not really having to do any management, right? And there's no gas, well, there's less gas costs. This has pretty much resulted in like a Convex acquiring like majority share of the VCRV market, like the voting power, as you can see here. So I guess this will make a lot more sense if we sort of dive a bit deeper into the tokenomics. Before actually explaining like the diagram and like the walkthrough, I think it's probably best if we sort of outline a few things first. So first of all, the supply is like it's a max supply. It's limited to 100 million CVX, right? The minting is actually quite interesting because rather than being a function of time, it's linked to the amount of CRV claimed by the LP positions. Okay, so like I said, LPs deposit their LP tokens into the protocol, and this is then going to start generating CRV rewards. And as Convex claims those rewards from the pools, CVX gets emitted, right? And the ratio of this emission pretty much changes for every 100k CVX emitted, right? So it's pretty much going to taper off, okay? This is quite interesting because it means that there's a relationship between CVX and the underlying CRV. So as you can see here, 1 CVX pretty much equates to 5.49 CRV currently, as of 2 weeks ago. From this, then, there's actually two interesting dynamics. Okay, so the first one being that once we hit around 650 million CRV claimed, so deposited into Convex, we're pretty much going to be at the maximum supply, right? So there's not going to be any more CVX emitted. So what does that mean? It means that there's at this point there's a 1 to 6.5 ratio, as in 1 CVX equates to 6.5 CRV. Okay, so what does that mean? That the as more CRV is deposited or claimed by the protocol, this ratio is only going to get better, right? Just because CVX has finished being minted and distributed, it doesn't mean that the product won't carry on working, right? There's still reasons for people, mainly like the yield and the optimization for people to still deposit CRV, right? And obviously the LP positions that Convex holds are still going to accrue CRV, and obviously this will only get better and better over time. The other interesting dynamic is pretty much the price relationship. Okay, so if since CVX is related to CRV, it means that there's going to be this price relationship pretty much. So if you think about it, so if 1 CVX currently controls 5.49 CRV, okay, so there's like an underlying value of CRV, then if you multiply that by the current price of CRV, you're going to pretty much get the cost to buy this amount of CRV. Okay, if you compare the two prices between like the underlying cost of the CRV and the cost of one Convex, which obviously holds the same amount, right? If there's a obviously there will be a difference in price, and depending on that difference, it's going to be better to buy one or buy the other, right? So in this case, the cost to buy the underlying CRV is greater than it is to buy CVX. Okay, so it's pretty much easier to visualize with this chart, right? So if the purple line is below the 0 line, it means it's cheaper to buy CVX than the underlying CRV, and obviously vice versa when purple line is above, it's cheaper to buy the underlying CRV. And this sort of makes sense because due to the relationship, like when people realize that it's more expensive to buy the underlying CRV than it is to buy just one CVX, for example, well, people are going to buy CVX. Okay, this buy pressure increases the price, and then this will eventually tip the scales the other way, right? So then the CVX will be more expensive than the CRV, and then the same thing, it pretty much goes back, right? So people will buy CRV, and then this will increase the CRV price, and thus we get back to the same point, right? So it's sort of like this, well, it's a relationship more than a flywheel. So what is the demand for CVX then? Well, to briefly explain, I guess protocols, as we mentioned, they want liquidity, right? And the way that they're going to sort of be able to direct this liquidity is via CRV emissions, okay? And CRV emissions come from the ability to vote on where these emissions go come from the VCRV, okay? So what do they want? They want VCRV, okay? And the way that they get that is either to buy it directly, which they can't actually do, okay? So the protocols have to be whitelisted by Curve to sort of buy and lock CRV directly, right? And there's a bunch of reasons for that. Some of them are security reasons, but basically, suffice to say, they can't do this themselves. They have to be whitelisted, okay? So they can either buy it, they can either buy CVX, which has an underlying amount of VCRV, or they can bribe CVX holders, okay? And we'll get to what that means shortly. But that means that there's, I guess, protocols have the desire to purchase CVX. And subsequently, due to this bribe, right, due to the reason, due to this, I guess, it also creates a market demand for CVX, right? So as somebody who maybe isn't providing liquidity or anything like that, there is still an enticing demand or buy decision to sort of acquire CVX and take part in this Bribe Marketplace, simply because we know that protocols obviously want to direct liquidity to their pools via CVX, okay? So I guess this is where we can now dive into the diagram a bit deeper. So there's two ways, I guess, to enter the Convex system, so to speak. So the first one will be the LP token holders, right? So somebody, let's say, has liquidity, they deposit that on Curve, and then in return they get an LP token, okay? Subsequently, they take that and deposit that into Convex. So that's the first point. The second one is just a simple CRV holder, okay? So somebody who's gone and bought Curve on the market, and yeah, they can either, if they want to, they can lock that in Curve and start generating some fees, or they can come to Convex and sort of deposit that into Convex, and in return get a liquid wrapper, so CVX CRV, okay? Now, one thing to note here is that when a user deposits CRV, it is it's permanently deposited. You can't take it back out, okay? So when I've been mentioning, so when I was saying, for example, that CVX has underlying CRV, it's underlying, but it isn't backed by CRV, because it can't really be, you can't, I guess, deposit CVX CRV and take CRV out, right? So it's only one way, okay? You can obviously sell this on the open market to get your underlying CRV back, but you can't sort of deposit one and take the other one out, okay? So yeah, so what does Convex then do with this CRV? Well, they take it to Curve, they max lock it, okay? They pretty much do what a person would normally do, and then they start to accrue VCRV themselves, okay? Now, with this, with depositing this CRV, they start to slowly also accrue these CRV rewards, okay? And as I mentioned before, as they start to claim the rewards, they're basically going to start minting the CVX, okay? And this gets distributed to LP token holders and CVX CRV stakers, as you can see here and here, right? Subsequently, as CRV rewards are claimed, then the LP token holders get their max boost, right? They get the yield that they want. Now, what is in it then for the CRV holders, right? So obviously they've pretty much deposited the CRV, they've gotten a liquid token back. Now what they can do is stake that token to get a cut of the fees, right? And the interesting thing is that the fees, it's a 16% fee cut from all the pools that Convex holds, right? So imagine they've got 100 LP positions. Well, it's going to be a 16% cut of all of those deposited proportionally back to CVX CRV stakers. That then also get siphoned off to CVX stakers and then vote locked Convex. Okay. Now, what is this vote locked Convex stuff? Well, pretty much because Convex is accruing VCRV, okay, they understand the power of VSVRV and the reason for protocols desiring it. They want it obviously to direct emissions to their curve pools, okay. So what they've pretty much enabled is this Bribe Marketplace, okay, and the mechanism that they sort of implemented was similar to Curve, but quite shorter, right? So people lock the CVX that they have, right, and this makes them eligible then for the bribes. So let's say Frax comes in and says, okay, here's 50,000 Frax tokens for whoever is willing to vote for my gauge on Curve, right? And yeah, you can participate in this, and you'll basically take a cut of that bribe, okay? Yeah, and that's what's obviously then directs emissions to Curve, and then obviously that suffices what the protocols want, right? And yeah, subsequently, when you vote lock your Convex, you're also going to be getting like 1% of this fee share, and it's automatically going to stake your CVX. Okay, so you're pretty much getting 6% additionally on top of the bribes that you're getting from protocols. So it's quite enticing, I guess you could say. Some notable points from this then is that, yeah, so as Convex sort of progresses, you can see that there's an inflow of VCRV, but there's no outflow, right? This isn't an outflow, this is just an illustrative. But basically, they're accruing VCRV as much as possible, okay? Because as you can see, here and here in the fee share, right, they're paying it out in their wrapped token, okay? So in reality, they're only sort of paying out 10% in CRV rewards to stakers, okay? The other, like the 6%, they're keeping for themselves, and then obviously max locking that back again and accruing more VCRV. So they understand that the VCRV is the token with power here and the token that is desirable. So that's obviously the reason for that. Yeah, and then I guess lastly, there's no treasury inflow, but we'll get to that shortly, I guess. So I guess that's a brief explanation, understanding of Convex, and I guess we can drop into some questions. I don't know if anybody has any questions, or we can just maybe go about answering some of these. I don't know if how does it work here? Does people have to put their hands up, or do they just like come up and ask? I'm not sure. If not, I'll just go through these questions, I guess.
I think they could just unmute. So if you have a question, just unmute and go for it.
Cool.
I'd really like to know about the Terra pile of tokens that they have.
Yeah. See, that's the one that I know the least about, and I think most people do, because it's like obviously like it made a lot of sense when they had UST, right? They were a big participator in like the Bribe Marketplace, and obviously they held a big bag. And when UST sort of collapsed, I mean, everybody thought that, yeah, well, that would just be slowly offloaded. But for some reason, they've held it. So I don't know if this is like alpha for UST 2.0 or not. I'm not sure. But yeah, it's slightly worrying because, again, they are a big holder. Now, they do lock it, which is weird, right? So well, it's not weird. Obviously, if you've got a yield-bearing asset, you might as well use it, right? So they do lock it, meaning that you could sort of like, I guess, hop in and out of the lock periods if you don't want to sort of trade this. But it is, I guess, in the long term, until we sort of know what they're doing with it, it is a bit of a concern. But as to what they're doing, I don't know, and nobody can sort of like shine light on that except from them, I think.
Well, I don't think they're launching another stablecoin, and if they're not, then Curve isn't really the platform for them to use, right?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I don't know really. Yeah, it's weird.
It's a risk. Like for me, it's like a.
It is. Yeah, that's the thing. It's
because it's a lot of
long-term risk because
they want to do any harm here, they could, right?
It's like 2.3 million tokens, which is a pretty decent chunk.
Yeah.
Yeah, but well, anyway, so I guess just going through these quickly then. So I guess because Convex is sort of built on top of Curve, so to speak, right? You have to ask the question, well, what happens if Curve loses market dominance, right? Now, that's true, right? So if CRV sort of does lose importance, right, it does lose demand, then it doesn't really make sense for Convex to sort of carry on being, I guess, important, right? It's going to also lose market share, so to speak. And I guess Convex has sort of like accounted for this in that they've slowly started to expand, right? They're currently I don't know. Oh, there we go. Mute. Okay. Yeah, I don't know. Basically, what they're doing is also accruing FXS, which is like the shares token for Frax, right? And I don't know about what their long-term plans are, so to speak. I have sort of like been in the Discord quite a bit, and they do seem quite, I don't know, confident in sort of staying in this like trio of Convex, Curve, and Frax, and sort of building out their dominance there, which is fine because like if they were to sort of become this aggregator of I guess V tokens, then it would, I don't know, it would mean a lot more competition. Like there's a couple of protocols doing that already. Redacted Cartel is one. So I guess yes, it is a concern if Curve sort of does lose market dominance. They are sort of mitigating this somewhat with the FXS, which again is in early stages and isn't that productive currently. But it's just something to keep in mind, I would say.
How does the other competition and like those that amass VE tokens, how do their tokenomics differ from what Convex does? Do you know? Any chance?
No, I don't actually. I've not looked
That'd be an
into them
interesting
much.
one, right? To see, because that would be their main competition. And I know that Convex probably partners with Curve, right? And that's how they might have gotten into the position where they're in.
No, actually, that's the interesting thing. There was no, like, many people speculated that the Convex team sort of, they are part of Curve or they sort of like partner with them. But no, it was literally market forces in the sense that they pretty much said to current CRV holders, if you sort of vote to whitelist us, then we're going to give you an airdrop. So that's sort of how they got the foot in the door. And yeah, and then obviously in the LP, so the yield optimization service is quite enticing for LPs and for just simple CRV holders. So it's just literally been decided by the market that it's just the best thing to do with your assets at one point or another. So, but yeah, I do agree. Like analysis between different protocols that are accruing the tokens could be interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, all of these like providing liquidity to VE tokens.
Yeah. I mean, I think one of the arguments for that Convex put forward is that the VE token model only really works if you have a moat in liquidity, right? I mean, it works to some extent in other places, but I think that's their main mantra, right? And they sort of see Curve as being that moat, and I guess Frax playing a big role in that too. So I think that's their reasoning for sort of not wanting to expect. They have mentioned it a couple of times, I think, in the Discord, but I think they're currently set on just maintaining those three for now, at least. Another question that I guess came up in analyzing all this was, so obviously when you deposit CRV, right, you get a liquid wrapper back, right? You get this CVX CRV. Now, what would most people do if when you deposit your CRV into the protocol, you get given back a token that's worth half? Well, it wouldn't inspire much confidence, would it? I mean, it's liquid, but it's like 50% liquid, so to speak. So they sort of have to maintain a decent peg, right? It isn't, I guess, the same as maybe a stable coin, right? It's not pegged to the dollar, so to speak, but it does sort of have to maintain a decent peg. Otherwise, it's just going to basically, it won't inspire much confidence for people to deposit CRV into the protocol, okay? Now, one of the ways that they sort of maintain deeper liquidity is actually by, so incentivizing this liquidity with CVX emissions on certain pools, right? So a concern comes about when these emissions, I guess, finally stop in around about to the 2025. Well, what's going to happen to the wrapper, right? Will it have enough, I guess, will it have enough liquidity to sort of be able to maintain its peg with bribes or not? I don't know. This is something that I've not been able to answer properly, I guess.
I'm just trying to think. Is there like some downward spiral scenario? In this whole thing?
The like Luna type thing, right?
Yeah.
Well, there's no redemption mechanism, as I mentioned, right? So it's literally you deposit CRV, you get CVX CRV back, and that's that, right? Now, yeah. So if people start to mass sell CVX CRV for Curve, then you are going to affect the peg somewhat. But again, I don't know if that would be a problem in the long run, because it should, I guess, stabilize if they, I guess, incentivize liquidity properly or bribe. So again, I don't know if like it is an issue maybe, but because it's not sort of as problematic as it being like a stable coin, like it's not meant to hold value, right? It can fluctuate. So, and I think like the chart, do you have the chart here? I think it's been pretty. Are you guys seeing this?
Yep.
Why is it not appearing? Oh, there we go. Yeah, so it's like been pretty decent. I mean, like the one here, 1 for 1. So yeah, I mean, and there's also this argument about like it could in time have a premium, right, on the price of CRV, simply because it does provide a better service, I guess you could say. Obviously, the market currently doesn't deem it that way, and even though it is trading, like 5% below peg, it sort of has bounced back previously, right? So 10%. And again, I've not sort of seen people be too concerned about it. So I don't know how much of a concern it is it not sort of maintaining a 1-to-1 peg. But again, I don't think people will be very happy if it sort of goes down to like 70 cents, right? As in 70%. So it's not something that maybe is too concerning, and maybe the liquidity in 2025 is deep enough to sort of suffice for mass sell-off. You also have to think about that. I mean, once this also fits into, since the fact, as if we go back here, right? So it's not literally that you're just depositing CRV and getting CVX CRV back, right? Because this doesn't do anything. What you actually want is yield on the asset, right? So you have to stake it. So this is somewhat of a barrier, so to speak. So yeah, people could mass sell it if they want to, but I mean, they're getting fees for staking it, and plus they're staking it. So I guess it's less liquid.
Fewer stakers, you would get more rewards. And that would bring them back in, right?
Exactly. So I guess it's some form of a balancing mechanism.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. As for like the treasury inflow, that's an interesting one actually, because again, just going back to this. So as you can see, there's currently no treasury inflow of CVX, right? And they are, I guess, bribing. Well, not bribing. So they are sort of including this in like the emissions the rewards for LP token holders, right? And stakers. So when this finishes, I mean, obviously it's not the end of the world, but there is no sort of it's just basically going to decrease the amount of rewards or decrease the reasons for people sort of maintaining staking and maintaining their liquidity. Now, there has been, I guess, talk of, well, I think there is actually a mechanism in place that allows people to redeposit CVX into the protocol and get some form of boost on their voting power. Again, I think it's like implemented but not turned on, like the fee switch in uni, so to speak. So I wasn't I couldn't figure out how it works or if it actually like works in countering that problem. But yeah, currently no treasury inflow, which is.
They have some time until the rewards run out, right?
Yeah. So again, it's they've got quite a decent amount of CVX in the treasury anyway. So I don't think it is a concern. It's just something to keep in mind.
And maybe then they don't need it because I mean, it's kind of weird, like, right? I'd see the token here as a bootstrapping mechanism, but then they use it for so long that it was like maybe they're almost like using it for too long, this bootstrapping mechanism.
Yeah. No, I agree. And I mean, if you think about it too, if they sort of amass enough LP positions and enough VCRV, right, they're going to be able to sort of provide pretty decent yield anyway, right, without this sort of CVX emissions. And
you don't
plus,
need any CVX token for that then.
Yeah, and like if the reason to hold CVX is sort of to lock it and get bribes, then I mean it makes sense that nobody's really going to sell it anyway. So or redeposit it into the treasury anyway. So again, yeah, I don't think it'll be much of a problem. I guess we'll see.
Yeah.
A couple of comments here.
It's super interesting, but it's also like it's just freaking complex what they've done.
Yeah, it's interesting because
there's
it is
like 4 different tokens and
yeah. I mean, I guess I see it like pretty simple now, just because I've been looking at it for the past couple of weeks. So, but yeah, I mean, it's not like easy to understand at first glance, I guess. But yeah, and especially because like the tokens are pretty similar in naming, like CVX, CRV, CVX, CRV, and then vote lot CVX, right? It's like it can get a bit confusing.
Yeah. Because like as an investor, I don't know, like either you play this completely macro and you think, okay, curve is going to perform well, so this is going to perform well, but otherwise you kind of have to look at these things, right, to understand why people would stake this liquid wrapped token and what that does, right, and where the demand for it would come from. And for that, you kind of have to understand this all. It makes it really hard for people.
Well, the way I sort of see it is that the demand. So if we go back to like the 2 main solutions, right? So they've got. Actually, I removed that slide. Never mind. So they've got like the Bribe Marketplace type thing, and then they've got the Yield Optimiser. And if you noticed in the Yield Optimiser stuff, there's no mention of CVX whatsoever. That works without like a token, right? It's literally people deposit the LP tokens, the other people deposit CRV, and Curve goes about locking that into Convex goes about locking that into Curve, and then they just provide the rewards back, right? And then they could cut all this part out if they wanted to, and just literally provide yields back to CRV stakers, right?
Without a token,
holders. Yeah, without a token. So I guess from looking at it as like a CVX as an investment, the only thing you sort of have to understand is why do protocols want CVX, right? And because CVX is a levered bet, it's a levered version of CRV because of this, right? Because of this relationship. You just sort of understand that, protocols need this because they need liquidity, and they can't sort of do it themselves. So unless they're whitelisted, obviously. So they're going to have to go via CVX anyway, right? So
it's just this entry mechanism then, right? Because they otherwise couldn't get access to the CRV token. Yeah,
exactly. And like this actually leads quite well into this question. So what happens if bribes dry up, right? So if we're saying that, for example, protocols need to bribe to sort of, it's either buy or bribe CVX holders, right? To sort of direct liquidity, then what happens once they get whitelisted by Curve, right? So if they get whitelisted directly, they can just cut this out. They can go and buy CRV and lock it themselves, and that's it, and Bob's your uncle, right? So there is, I guess, this concern of people saying, well, there's more and more protocols getting whitelisted. I think like Abracadabra got whitelisted.
Once they're whitelisted, then
it cuts out the, I guess, it cuts out a major part of the demand, right? Now, I guess one of the arguments that CVX bulls sort of give for this is, well, that's fine. I mean, imagine a future where everybody's whitelisted, okay? There would still be demand for CVX because of the market majority, so to the already accrued VCRV, right? So if they've got 57% of the current voting power, right, that they're never going to get let go of that, right? So they're still the protocols, even if they're whitelisted, they're still going to have to bribe or buy that CVX to sort of get that difference in market share, if you know what I mean. So imagine there's only 5 protocols in the world, and they're all whitelisted by Curve, right? So each of them are going to sort of have an equal say, so to speak. Imagine they have the same amount of money, right? They can all sort of have an equal say in directing emissions, right? But then there's only X amount of Curve to go around, right? And Convex currently has X amount of that Curve locked in its protocol, right? So the only way to access it is to sort of go via CVX. So I don't know, sure if it's like a reasonable argument. It's just something that people bring up quite often. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, and the other benefit too for bribing is that it's just more capital efficient, and it's a lot more, I guess, measurable for protocols to sort of figure out what they're getting in return for their dollars, right? So if we go to Llama Air Force, we can sort of see that. Yeah, so where is it now? It's here. So the dollars per bootlock CVX, right? So every dollar there. Wait, no, is it here? It's overview. Right, here we go. Sorry. So for every dollar that a protocol bribes, right, they're going to pretty much be directing $1.21 worth of emissions, right? And that's something that is incredibly hard to measure if you're just like a standalone protocol directing your own token to your own pools, right? You don't know how, you can't really, it's hard to quantify, I guess you could say. And this sort of gives you quite a nice way to sort of understand what the value is that you're sort of driving to your pool, right, to your token, so to speak. Another point on this too is that if this is above $1, then there's still an incentive for somebody to sort of bribe, so to speak, right? So if they were to be below $1, then it's basically you're paying $1 to get less than $1 worth of emissions, so you're not going to do it, right? Yeah. So as long as this is above, yeah. So it's like there's 21 X, 21% currently left. Not left. I don't know how you would. It changes based on the amount of. Yeah, it's pretty much. And as you can see, like here, it's like when we're in the bull run. I mean, obviously, it was a lot more enticing. Like here, for example, you got 87 cents per vote locked Convex, right? So if you have, let's say, one, just to make it easy, one Convex token, right? Then you pretty much you was getting 87 cents for that vote locked Convex token, right? And that was like, I guess, the peak of it. And obviously now it's pretty abysmal, but it's picking up slowly. Yeah. But yeah, I don't know. Does anybody have any additional questions? Okay. Well, I guess there's no other questions then. So yeah.
No, great talk. Thanks. This was really good.
Yeah. Awesome. I guess see you in the next one then.
Yeah. Thank you.